Good afternoon and welcome to the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. Today's the end of day 3. The theme was leaving no one behind. We've had a number of panel discussions and meetings, and I'm here to give you a brief synopsis of some of the things that happened today. And we will proceed to some questions to our panel, to our guests this afternoon. So earlier at the second plenary, we had the Honorable Senator Lauren Legarda. She started by highlighting that inclusivity is not a choice but a necessity if we are to build resilient communities, gender-responsive disaster risk governance, which recognizes that women and girls are merely not victims but leaders and agents of change. And then Secretary Teodoro of the Department of National Defense emphasized that the importance of incorporating local experiences into current frameworks. He urged a shift in viewing local units not just as a political or democratic entities, but also as a key to fostering a sense of community and kinship that encourages collective action. There was a panel discussion that was focused on practical solutions to enhance disaster risk financing, ensuring that no one is left behind by establishing a gender-responsive and inclusive disaster risk governance. From the DSWD, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, Undersecretary Cahipe underscored the efforts and programs of the Philippine government on social protection systems to address the needs of highly vulnerable sectors of communities during disasters. And there are a number of very important highlights. Most of them are, all of them actually are online in the APMCDRR Facebook page. You can watch the videos. In the meantime, let's move on to the Sendai Gap. Also mentioned today in the throughout the course of the discussions, to accelerate the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, it is crucial to ensure that climate resilience and disaster risk reduction efforts are inclusive and that they do not exacerbate inequalities. Development must be people-centered, gender-responsive, and accessible to all, promoting the rights and leadership of women, diverse gender identities, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, older persons, and other historically excluded groups. And today we are joined by two very important speakers and participants of this conference. We have Madhavi Ariyabandu from Sri Lanka of Duryog, Nivaran, and Maria Holtsberg, the Deputy Regional Director and Portfolio Lead for Humanitarian Action, Disaster Risk Reduction, and Climate Change of the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Okay, let's maybe we can have a brief statement first from Ms. Maria and then from Ms. Madhavi.
Thank you so much for this overview, and I just want to say as part of our statement, or my statement, is recognizing and thanking the organizers for putting gender and inclusion at the center of this important conference, and for highlighting the Gender Action Plan, which we are here to talk more about. And just a small background, the Gender Action Plan was officially launched in New York in March this year during the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. And it was an action plan that's convened, it's coordinated through the UNDRR, UNFPA, and UN Women, and it serves as a vital technical document that was created through extensive consultation. So all member states who are participating here at APMCDRR have contributed to the language in the action plan. So it's rooted and grounded in what we think is going to be able to be advanced, as well as input from key stakeholders. And that stakeholder is one of them sitting here next to me.
Okay, Thank you, Maria. Ms. Madhavi? Go ahead.
Good evening. In this conference, as Maria also mentioned, the issue of gender and social inclusion is taken as a very important pillar, key issue, and it is looked at from different angles. And I'm really pleased that the community angle, the community voice, there are many opportunities to bring out the issue of social inclusion, gendered impacts of disasters, issues of vulnerability and capacity are brought to the fore and discussed in detail, putting against the global frameworks such as the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, Sendai Gender Action Plan, so that we are able to look at the global guidance together with the community experiences and the aspirations and see how we can put the two things together. And another specific element of this conference is that in this whole conference, we are practicing what we call the gender observatory. So we are looking at the participation of the conference as well as the content of the entire conference in terms of gender and inclusion. So we are observing each session in terms of who are the speakers, panelists, participants, and how each session is looking at the gender and social inclusion issues to make an assessment how as a conference, what is the commitment and what is the level of discussion on this important topic. So we are able to make a judgment where we are and what next we need to do in order to, and what improvements we need to make. So in that sense, I think this conference is giving opportunity to showcase the issues as well as it's going to give us some very good markers and indicators as to where we are on the issue.
Thank you, Madhavi. Let's go on with our questions. Very interesting topic. For Maria, why do member states need to support and use Gender Action Plan?
Thank you so much for the question. And basically, it is clear that we need to accelerate action in order to ensure that the Sendai Framework is being fulfilled. And we are we're determined, it is determined that an action plan is needed in order for us to advance these critical components, which is why member states would need to support and use it. I will say that the Gender Action Plan and the components in it, there's nothing new in this plan. It is rooted in already existing action. It is action that already has been advanced by governments on different levels or in communities and by different stakeholders. However, the acceleration means that we need to put it all together into a roadmap. And just want to take a moment to recognize and thank the Philippines for hosting this conference, APMCDRR, because it is a nation recognized as a leader in Southeast Asia for its commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. And just wanted to highlight, for instance, the Magna Carta of Women or the Gender and Development, so the GAD budget, as well as the Gender Mainstreaming Monitoring System. These are examples that have formed components in the action plan that we want governments, member states across the region to adopt and use. So each country and each stakeholder, because we do have civil society and other key stakeholders that need to be part of this gender action plan.
Thank you for highlighting that the Philippines is leading in the gender equality conversation by supporting it with legislation and policies. A question for Madhavi. In your long years of working on issues of gender and women and girls at the local level, what do you see are the remaining challenges and gaps to gender transformative disaster risk reduction?
Thank you for highlighting this issue. I think there are very many challenges remaining. I would say we need to look at the disaster risk governance aspect, which the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction has also highlighted disaster risk governance. And we need to now look at how we can make disaster risk governance inclusive. So there I see two main challenges. What is the readiness of governance institutions at the national level as well as at the local level to incorporate the disaster risk information into the governance discussions to the local level development, community development, rural development, agriculture development, water resources management development, disaster preparedness. So in all those areas, that is one element. The second element is to what extent the local governance institutions are ready to engage with the dialogue with the communities who are living with risk, the at-risk communities. It could be flood, it could be drought, it could be landslides. So in order to have effective disaster risk governance, there should be dialogue between the communities living with risk and with the governance institutions. So that is one aspect. Secondly, to what extent the communities are ready to engage in that dialogue. And there we need to look at the inclusion aspect. In many communities, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, women are not ready to speak out, to express their views, to take position and participate in public roles. And the community is at large also not ready to accept women in those positions. So there need to be quite a lot of community mobilization to encourage women to participate, speaking out, what are their issues when it comes to risk and vulnerability, risk management, and make that risk communication coming from women and the acceptance of women communicating about risk and risk management and getting that into the governance level. And in risk governance, there's also another aspect, the professionals, the technicians, the scientists who are women. To what extent are they part of the governance institutions? So all those things actually are remaining issues for transformative, gender transformative risk reduction in our experience when we look at the communities who are in the Asia-Pacific region.
Thank you. I'm very interested to know, Maria, why was the Sendai Gap only developed around the same time as the Sendai midterm review and not early on?
Thanks for that very important question, and I have two answers for that. The first is that the Sendai midterm review is the stock-taking period. So this is where it was abundantly clear to the system, and I'm talking the full disaster risk reduction system, that working cohesively on gender responsive or gender transformative actions had not been done on a systematic level. So I before talk about how there's many examples of important work being advanced, but it had not been maybe done from a systematic perspective. And as Madhavi also mentioned, there's many gaps and challenges within the communities to ensure women in all their diversities, voices are being heard. So the midterm review was a good opportunity to actually spotlight that there was a need for an acceleration plan. And when you do a midterm review, that's also where you do a gap analysis. And it was clear there through that the gender is one of those components that needed to have particular attention, which is why the action plan was formalized. It's also recognizing the absolute need for a whole of society approach, meaning that we build on each of the key departments across the ecosystem of disaster risk reduction to work on this. But I will also say that as gender stakeholders and as members of the gender stakeholder group within the APMCDRR mechanism, it has always been recognized that it is important to advance gender measures. So there's always been actionable gender recommendations and guidelines that have been attached to every action plan that's been developed for advancing Sendai. It is now that we have something that is formalized and attached specifically and explicitly linked to the 4 priorities. So that's my answer.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. At the plenary session today, it was concluded by emphasizing the need for continued collaboration and partnerships at all levels. The integration of local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge alongside the active participation of women, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups was recognized as essential to building community resilience. My question, Madhavi, do you see the Sendai Action Gap accelerating progress on integrating gender in DRR?
Sendai Gap, the Gender Action Plan, of course, it has the potential to support accelerating, integrating gender into disaster risk reduction. And as Maria said, it doesn't really say anything new, but it brings the focus onto specific measures which need to be done in order to achieve gender responsive disaster risk reduction. But the way I see it, for it to actually realize the expected results, you also need to work on the awareness building, capacity building, support with the tools for disaggregated data collection, gender analysis, because when you interact with the officials at the national government as well as provincial and local governments, very often you find there are no persons at the governments who have the skills in order to do, for example, a gender analysis or to be able to apply the recommendations of a gender analysis to inform the policies or decisions which are required to, for example, to prepare a disaster preparedness plan or a last mile of an early warning system, how to deal with the specific vulnerabilities and the requirements of men, women, people of different genders, elderly persons, and people with disabilities. So for Sendai Gap to be successful, its implementation require support in these different areas. I mean, it has 9 key objectives. So you need to unpack the 9 key objectives, and different governments will require support at different levels. So as the gender stakeholder group of the Asia-Pacific Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, the various partners as well as the United Nations partners need to provide that support, information, awareness, resources, sometimes maybe financial support, so that the governments and the other stakeholders are able to take forward the recommendations of the gender.
Thank you. Throughout the day, there were some other highlights. Mr. Fasala of the People with Disabilities Solomon Islands discussed that charity and medical models of disability have long been replaced by social and human rights-based approaches to ensure inclusivity. However, barriers from attitude and stigma are existing challenges that must be addressed. And Mr. Smith of UNFPA highlighted the efforts of the organization to uphold the key objectives of the Sendai Framework Gender Action Plan to ensure access to sexual and reproductive health services, and also the prevention and response to gender-based violence in disaster context. And Ms. Ali of the National Technical Program Specialist Peace and Justice Network of Pakistan cited the progressive efforts in Pakistan to provide diverse perspectives in disaster response governance, including the enactment of the Transgender Rights Protection Act. It's been very enlightening to hear about the highlights also from your sector. I am also a stakeholder in this, not only because I'm a woman, but I'm a mother to 3 little women. So I'd like to know, what are your key takeaways from today, the end of day 3, before we end this briefing? Any key takeaways from your interaction?
My key takeaway is that it is a complex conversation to have, because when we are complex beings, we are not women, men, we in these different categories, because we fulfill so many different roles. We are caregivers. We may be caregivers of elderly. We may be caregivers of people living with disability, or family members with disability, or we are people who have disability. And it is complex to be able to say, here's a plan, here's a roadmap for you to take forward, to advance, so that you become more resilient in the time of crisis. For member states, there needs to be a recognition of the intersectional components that we embody. That's my key takeaway, actually.
Thank you. Ms. Madhavi?
My key takeaway would be the conversation about the gender and inclusion has advanced, and we are including more and more groups who are marginalized for different reasons, socially, economically, and politically. But however, when you actually face the society, how to address these issues, you feel there is actually a huge aspect of resistance. Resistance to change anything the way we are working, institutionally, strategically, and attitudinally. So my takeaway would be, therefore, we also need to realize those bottlenecks and barriers. And specifically, I would say, when it comes to gender and social inclusion, the attitudinal barriers, particularly in this region, are really strong. So one way to break those attitudinal barriers is more knowledge, more awareness, and also maybe policing and indicators and measuring. So we need a combination of both. Beyond what we are discussing in this conference and in other forums, we also need to focus on how do we break those barriers in very practical terms.
Well, thank you very much for enlightening us on implementing the Sendai Gap and for sharing your insights. It is very complex, but as you mentioned, the conversation has advanced, and thanks to your good work, it continues, the work continues. So thank you again, Madhavi, Ariyabandu, and Maria Holtsberg. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. This concludes our press briefing. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our observations and learning with a much larger audience. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.